Irete, I think we can start in a couple of minutes at 11:05.
Are we happy to start?
Yes, we can start.
Okay, fantastic. We have 30 participants, which is a good number. So I'm happy that the number of people that have been able to make it on time. Good morning, everyone. My name is Oluwagbemi. I work with the Foreign Office as the head of campaigns for West Africa. I'm filling in for my colleague, Pallavi, who has put this together. I think this is such an important briefing, and I'm really pleased that number of you that have been able to join. So thank you for joining. As we know, climate change isn't something that is, just happening in the future. It's already happening now. It's already impacting us in so many ways, and that's really what this briefing is about. I'll be handing over very shortly to my colleague Alex, who is our climate change advisor from East Africa. He will be giving an introduction to COP26, which, when we talk about climate change, is probably one of the most, if not the most important conference that we're going to have on this topic. It's really an opportunity for the world to come together and coordinate the actions that we need to take on climate change. And after that, we'll be handing over to our scientist from IPAC, Abubakar, who will be talking about the 10 things that you may not have known about how climate change affects East Africa. Alex, are you happy for me to hand over to you now?
Sure, thanks, Areti.
Cool.
Great, good morning, everyone. So as Areti says, my name is Alex Crook. I am the East Africa climate change lead based in Kampala, Uganda, which is quite rainy today, but inevitably in Kampala's way will be sunny later, so that's lovely. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's happening about COP and a bit about the UK focus and efforts in the region, not focusing too much on those climate change impacts themselves, because obviously Abubakar is going to do that himself. So COP26, which is the Conference of Parties, the UNFCCC annual climate change conference, is taking place in Glasgow in October, November, and it starts exactly 5 weeks today. As part of the conference, we're expecting around 30,000 people to visit Glasgow and participate in negotiations, in side events, etc. And to start that off, there will be a 2-day World Leaders Summit, and we already have over 90 world leaders confirmed to attend that summit. So it'll be the first summit of that kind in about 2 years, where we'll actually get world leaders in person in the same place to discuss this really important issue. So we'll have 2 days of World Leaders Summit, and then it will pass through to the normal kind of COP agenda, which will be around 10 days of negotiations and side events, like I said. And then the UK has devised a programme of theme days as part of that. And the theme days that the UK is focusing on will include, but not exclusively be around adaptation and resilience, loss and damage, energy, nature, transport, things like that. And I can give you a full list of them later if you're interested. But we're having days with specific side events and encouraging partners to also hold linked events at that time. That's COP coming up in 5 weeks, but also really importantly is Africa Climate Week, which is coming next week. So again, this is an annual UNFCCC event, normally held in person, but this year it will be purely virtual. And it's happening Monday to Thursday, or maybe Monday to Wednesday. Sorry, I haven't got it in front of me, next week. Africa Climate Week's a really important stepping stone to COP, especially this close. It's the themes of the event are linked to the key themes of the COP presidency and the key themes that are going to come out in COP. And it's also a really, really important chance for the UK to hear from African voices about what their priorities are right before COP26 itself. So just a tiny bit more about the UK's kind of approach to the presidency. So the way that we've decided to approach COP26 is by establishing 4 key goals that we are trying to work on. Those goals are adaptation, which we're going to hear about how important it is, mitigation, which means the reduction of emissions, finance, which is mainly focused on global, getting donor partners to commit more money towards finance, and then collaboration. By that, we mean getting the negotiations around the Paris Agreement and at COP right, but also working together on specific issues where we can make a lot of progress. And the UK has 4 such issues that we're really looking at: cash, that we've already talked about, finance, then coal, so trying to phase out coal use in power as quickly as possible. Cars, and by that we mean accelerating the transition to zero emission vehicles, and then trees and reversing deforestation globally. So those are the 4 kind of areas. As part of the UK presidency, we really recognise that despite not being responsible for global emissions, East Africa is already seeing the effects of climate change. And for that reason, we are really making sure that there is a key focus at this COP26 on adaptation and resilience. Whereas in the past, we know there has been some complaints from partners about too much focus on mitigation and not enough on adaptation. So that's something we're really focusing on. But I also just want to take 1 minute to talk about what the UK is already doing in East Africa to support countries with adaptation and resilience. I'm not going to go into too many specifics here, but we are working with countries across the region around weather and climate information. So that's for use from smallholder farmers all the way up to ministers to make sensible and informed decisions on mainly on agriculture, but also on other things. We're working on water to support resilient water supplies and clean. We're supporting resilient agriculture. We're promoting, there's a lot of resiliences, but we're promoting resilience in the humanitarian space for refugees, including and creating jobs around that space. We are looking at nature-based solutions and how we can reverse that deforestation that I was talking about, and including regeneration of wetlands. And we are working to support countries to gain the finance that they need to fund all of their ambitious plans in their nationally determined contributions and their national adaptation plans. So finally, I just want to say that the UK's commitment to climate and the UK's commitment to working with East African countries on climate won't stop at COP. This isn't a one kind of term thing for the UK. We have identified in our integrated review climate change as our top foreign policy priority. So this is not going anywhere. And the UK is committed to double its international climate finance spend to £11.6 billion over the next 5 years. So that's a significant increase in the amount of money that we are putting in globally on climate change to tackle climate change. And the hope is certainly from me, and I'm sure partners in the region, that a lot of that money will come to East Africa. So that's it from me.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Ireti.
Yeah, I was just going to hand over to Abubakar, and I just wanted to say, if you have any questions, there will be time for questions. So after Abubakar shares with us these 10 insights, Marta will be taking over and moderating questions from the group. So for your questions, Abubakar, are you happy for me to hand over to you?
Yes, thank you very much for that. Could you please confirm if you're seeing my screen?
Yeah, I can.
All right, let me blow it a bit. Great, yes. Thank you very much for inviting me to give this presentation, which is driven from a work or a public communication material that we developed together with my colleague Marta Breiber while I was at ICPAC. I have recently joined WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, the coordinator for meteorological infrastructure in Africa. So I'm based in Addis Ababa office, the regional office. So my background is in climate science. So I will be taking you through a few noticeable impact of climate change over East Africa and how it is affecting the population in the region. Let me just start by saying that Africa is, as Alex mentioned, that is not significantly contributing to greenhouse gases emission. Africa only contributes about 3.6% to the global emission of man-made greenhouse gases. So it's completely a small number. But we have seen the impact of climate change affecting significantly lives and livelihood of the population in Africa in generally and specifically in East Africa. The Guardian newspaper also ran a story last January 2020, that says in the first 2 weeks of the year that the Brit per capita, the emission in Britain per capita exceeded some of the annual emission in some of the African countries, including some of our East African countries like Ethiopia and Rwanda. So I see that now the UK government is putting a lot of effort to make this COP a successful event and to pull people together to work on it, which is something positive, and we should commend it. So, okay, without further ado, let me take you through the 10 impact of climate change that are already happening you might not be aware of. So we'll start with temperature, the increase in temperature. And as you know, the average global warming, the average global warming since pre-industrial time, which we talk about, let's say, from 1850 until now, we are talking about an average, global average, 1.2 Celsius increase in the global temperature. But if you look into our cities, where we have most of the population in Africa is concentrated, you find that most of the East African cities actually have been warming almost 2 degrees Celsius. And that is the case for, as you see in this map, the red dots, those are the cities that have warmed about 2 degrees Celsius. The ones that are on brown color, those are the cities that have warmed about about more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, and some of them almost on the fringe of 2 degrees Celsius. You see most of the cities in Sudan, Ethiopia, and the southern part of Tanzania have warmed almost more than 2 degrees Celsius. Addis Ababa, Khartoum in Sudan, and Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And then in Mogadishu and all of the major cities that have warmed to this degree. These information are from originally, they are visualized on our East Africa Hazard Watch, which is an ICPAC a platform where you can visit it anytime and see this information by yourself. But the data comes from Berkeley Earth, which is a project, non-profit project that analyzes the impact of climate change. And they're the one who calculated those measurements. So on the same side, the impact of warming over our region, the snow and ice cover over Mount Kalimanjaro is gradually disappearing, almost about 85% of it. It is 80 up to now. It's almost 90% of the ice and snow cover over Mount Kalimanjaro has disappeared since, if you compare it from 1912 up to the recent, it's almost 90%. The recent estimate is actually giving 90% that of the ice has disappeared. Mount Kalimanjaro is the highest mountain in Africa. It shoot up to almost 6 kilometers up in the level from the sea level. And it is the snow that accumulate over the mountain during the cold time, during the winter of the hemisphere, so say July, for example, and August. That snow and ice actually maintain the whole ecological system during the dry time, because when it comes to spring and summer, part of that ice in the natural variability, it melt out and it run as a runoff water, and it helped to maintain the vegetation cover. It supply water also to the wildlife on that area. So such changes that the mountain cannot maintain the ice and the snow cover, it will affect the whole ecological system over the mountain, Mount Kalimanjaro and the surrounding area. So this is in terms of warming, just the absolute warming. Now let's go and see the health impact or the health hazard from the warming. There is studies that shows that the heat waves, the number, frequency, and intensity of heat waves are increasing over East Africa, and this is also in line with the recent IPCC report, which also showed that overall Africa there is an increase, continuous increase in the frequency of heat waves events, and decrease in the frequency of cold waves. And so the population of East Africa, as we are developing and urbanizing and more people actually moving to cities, they will be at the risk and the health hazard from heat wave, which can affect lives in many ways, and they can cause death, especially for people who are vulnerable. They have some preconditions, and then you add to that the heat stress, it could lead to premature death. So this is in terms of health and due to the hotter condition. Along the same line also, warmer temperature have increased also the risk of malaria, Rift Valley fever, dengue fever, and chikungunya. Most of the diseases that are transmitted by mosquitoes, because warmer temperature enable the mosquitoes, it is the right condition for mosquitoes to breed and for their egg to hatch, and you have more mosquitoes around. Areas that usually to be not used to be susceptible to malaria, for example, areas that are highland, which are usually cold, even Nairobi, for example, and the areas that are urban and highland, and in the normal condition they used to be cold, so they are not the perfect environment for the breeding of mosquitoes. But now, as the warming is increasing over the region, more areas becomes the right environment for the breeding of mosquitoes, and consequently you have the diseases that are transmitted by mosquitoes like malaria, Rift Valley, dengue fever, and others. And I really noticed this personally in Nairobi. There are some months when the temperature is cold, I don't need to buy any mosquitoes prevention or those the one that you buy from the supermarket. So, but when the temperature gets warmer, you notice immediately that that you need to buy those chemicals that prevent mosquitoes from breeding, and this. So you can imagine that if we continue in the projected warming, you would have a common mosquito maybe almost through the year. So moving forward, the warming also over the globe has been affecting also the neighboring ocean system, which the ocean that is neighboring East Africa affect the weather and climate in East Africa. So generally, it is that 90% of the heat produced from global greenhouse emission is actually stored in the ocean. So the ocean serves as a sponge. If not for the ocean system, we will not be at 1.2 degrees Celsius now. We will be on a higher temperature, increase of temperature than that. But due to the ocean, because the ocean are from water bodies, and the water usually, physically we say it has a higher heat capacity. It can store heat without that heat appear as increase in the temperature immediately. So, but the ocean also, when they warm, they have affected the western part of the Indian Ocean specifically. And if you can see in this picture in front of you, this is from a study by Roxy et al., which is published in the journal, one of the Journal of the American Meteorological Society. It shows that this area, the brown area here, this area shows the correlation between the global temperature, the average global temperature, and the temperature over this part of the ocean, over each part of the ocean. So you can see the correlation is very high over the western part of the Indian Ocean, which is saying that there is a very strong correlation or link between the global warming and the warming over the western part of the Indian Ocean particularly. So when the ocean warms, then we have a lot of consequences that we have seen. So now we know that there's evidence that the western part of the Indian Ocean has been warming, and that now we see the manifestation or the impact of this warming. For example, we've seen an increase in the intensity and frequency of tropical cyclones. For example, now for the coastal region of East Africa became very susceptible to impact of tropical cyclones, and they are the strongest in record. So we have seen the strongest in record tropical cyclone to affect Somalia. It happened in 2018, and before that we have seen more frequency of Somalia being affected by tropical cyclone. The picture in front of you here, or the satellite image, the up one, it shows also in 2019 number of tropical cyclones that has developed simultaneously. So there were 4 tropical cyclones at one day developing simultaneously, and in some point in that season there were 8 tropical cyclones that developed over the western part of the Indian Ocean, and they made landfall over different area. One of them was tropical cyclone Pawan, which has affected Somalia. If you go down a little bit to the southern part of Africa, of East Africa, the strongest tropical cyclones in record to affect Mozambique, they happened in 2019, tropical cyclone Igad and tropical cyclone Kenneth. And the second, the strongest tropical cyclone happened in 2000, the year 2000. So you see that the extreme events are happening on the most recent time, which is going together with the tendency of warming over the global climate system. So, and also we have seen a bit new phenomena, which is tropical cyclones. 2 tropical cyclones in the season to affect Mozambique. Before, it's usually at least 1 tropical cyclone, but now we are seeing this tendency of 2 tropical cyclones in one season, and they are the strongest in record. So you can see the link, and also it is basic science, well known that the link or the tropical cyclones are really function of the temperature of the ocean. That is why they develop in the end of the summer. So in the beginning, the water starts warming. When you have it at the end of the summer, that is the warmest time of the year for the ocean. And then you add on that the impact of global warming, and then you have a very strong tropical cyclone that developed and they affect East Africa. Going forward, tropical cyclones now they start also to bring strange phenomena or new phenomena. In 2018, there are tropical cyclones, 2 tropical cyclones developed over the western part of the Indian Ocean, and they made landfall over the Arabian Desert. A region over the Saudi is called, in Arabic, it's called the Rub' al-Khali, which is translated literally to the empty quarter, the place that there's nothing there, it's just a desert. And what you can see here, this upper picture, it shows the satellite image from NASA between 2 different days in May, in the end of May 2018. One day, the desert is just dry, there's nothing there. Another day after the landfall of the tropical cyclone, very strong tropical cyclone, and it crossed over Oman and then went to Saudi Arabia. Tropical cyclones usually die when they reach the coastal area because they lose the source of energy, which is the ocean. But this one crossed over Oman up to Saudi Arabia and caused heavy rainfall over a desert region. What you are seeing, the right part of this panel, the upper picture here, this is after the tropical cyclone. You see the water pocket here. And this is create the right environment for the desert locusts. Another tropical cyclone, Pawan, also hit the same area in October. So it gave like a lifeline for the desert locusts to continue breed and have a bit of vegetation cover to feed on. And then from there, it is spread to Yemen. And another tropical cyclone, Pawan, in the end of 2019, brought it to East Africa. And then it continued on. And then you have, I can comment on something that there is, you can see that the impact of climate change will be exacerbated with some other socioeconomic factor. For example, political instability, lack of good governance, they will affect this condition and make it even worse. And this is what happened with the desert locust. I can comment on that later on in the questions. Moving forward in 2019, we have also very strong rainy season, especially the short rain of 2019. And that is affected also, caused floods and destroyed crops. And that led to, for example, increase in prices of certain crops. For example, tomato prices has increased from 0.7 something dollar up to 2.7 or 2.8 dollar, due to the flooding that destroyed tomato production in some areas. So this is, we started now to see that the real life impact when the extreme event happen, then they have these kind of consequences. Certain crop can be destroyed, and then you have no production during the season, and then the prices shoot up and make them less affordable. As I said, the warming over the ocean would really increase the risk of extreme events. And this is, we have seen them very clear, for example, in the season of 2019, end of 2019, and through 2020, multiple countries in East Africa, including Kenya, South Sudan, Uganda, and Djibouti, and Somalia, all those countries affected by very severe floods event due to heavy rainfall and causing flash floods over the region. Moving forward, the consequences of flood and heavy rainfall resulted in another phenomenon, which is the increase of the lake level. So, for example, in the season in May 2020, Lake Victoria reached highest level in record. It was about 13.5 meter, which is the highest in 120 years. And the increase in the level, of course, caused the lake to expand and destroying number of villages and livelihoods and lives of people living around Lake Victoria. In Sudan, also in August 2020, there was a flood in the end of August, and the River Nile in Khartoum reached 17.43 meter, and that was also a historical record, the highest level of the river in Khartoum since the beginning of the record about 100 years ago. And you can see we are breaking records here. You see this button of reaching extremes and breaking any record that we have seen before. So in the future, it is expected that, for example, the River Nile, the flow of the River Nile might increase by about 15%. But the variability of that, it will be very high. So there will be some years with low water, significantly low water, and other years with huge amount of water. So this is an increase in the variability of the river that is expected in the future climate scenarios. Okay, before I link this, I wanted to link here. The increase of the river here is linked to two phenomena. They are called Nino and La Nina, which also affect East Africa significantly. For example, during El Nino years, when the El Nino years, when the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean is warmer than usual. So there is some changes that happen on the temperature of the surface of the ocean. So when the temperature is warmer in the Eastern Pacific, warmer than usual, that we call it El Nino event, and they usually cause very heavy rainfall and very destructive pattern over East Africa. For example, very famous El Nino in 1997. And then that caused wide destruction and flood over Kenya. Together with another cycle of drought, they reduced, the World Bank estimated that the two events reduced the GDP of Kenya about 10%. This is just a severe event from El Nino. And then when it's La Nina, it usually causes drought and dryness over East Africa. And for the northern part of the region, for example, Ethiopia and Sudan, the effect is vice versa, it's vice. So when it's a Nino, Ethiopia and Sudan, they are in a dry condition, that the water level in the Nile reduced. And when it's a La Nina, it causes floods and heavy rainfall over Sudan and Ethiopia, and vice versa for Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania. So we also, from analysis at ICPAC, we have seen that there is a shortening of the rainy season. So the rainy season became more concentrated in a shorter time period. It starts late, relatively late, and it withdraw early. But in between, you have very severe event of rainfall, and that is not healthy for agriculture, because agriculture or plant usually prefer like water spreading over a certain time period to cover all the growth stage of plant and crops. This is what I mentioned before, which is about the warming of the ocean, and that frequency of El Nino and La Nina, these changes between El Nino and La Nina will happen more frequently, and their impact is usually severe over East Africa. And I just wanted to give an example. Now, as we speak today, part of Kenya is undergoing drought, especially the coastal part of Kenya and Kilifi County and that area is undergoing drought, and even the government have announced a drought emergency. But you notice that in 2000, the year before, we are reporting heavy floods and landslides over wider part of Kenya, and people lost their lives and livelihood and all that. So you can see by yourself how the system became very tough and very variable. And this is predicted from early stage, that climate change, there is something called natural variability in the climate system. We know that. But climate change will exacerbate this natural variability. So we became juggling from one extreme to another extreme, even if not over the same area, but the government will be juggling from landslide and flood over one region, and then before they finish with that, they will be running to drought and below normal rainfall in another region. So this is the current situation, and it is just visible. It's not need any more detail, like visible by the naked eyes and for the observer. So I will stop here. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Over to you.
Thank you, Abubakar. Thank you for this great introduction to the impacts of climate change in Eastern Africa. We're now encouraging everyone to ask questions in the chat or raising your hand so that we can take turns to take the questions. There are already a couple of questions in the chat. Okay, so there is one on, let me see. There was one question around like early warning systems as well for health risks, since we see that the vector-borne diseases like are on the rise. What can countries do to prepare more for health risks? And then we also have a question on a phenomenon that was experienced in Tanzania, where snow fell in Biharamulo in the western part of Lake Victoria. What phenomena could this be, Abubakar? This is a question from the LCO East Africa.
Okay, should we start with them one by one? Because exactly what, for example, the question about the health hazard and the increase in vector-borne diseases. I think one of the things that we can start with is we start quickly with trying to understand and analyze like carrier assessment. So we assess the areas that are where we have the temperature increase and what does it mean, for example, for vector-borne diseases. And then from there, we move into using climate information in a more objective way, weather and climate information, for example, to produce prediction. I think ICPAC, for example, and the regional and the National Meteorological Services with us here, Madam Stella, the director of KMD, together they produce a regular, for example, outlook on seasonal and shorter time scale, monthly and even weekly and daily, of course. So this information really should be used by the sector, the health sector, to produce, for example, also to produce outlook for the potential area where you have an outbreak of those vector-borne diseases, and to take early action against them, to preventive early action against them. So I think we need more collaboration and more work between the national Met services, the regional national Met services, and the different sectors. They really have to work together in benefiting from the climate and weather information that are available. And of course, also government will need to put resources and support for the national Met services so they can be able to provide robust information. National Met services are really underfunded. And I just call for this, that they really need, journalists can help on that they should call for more support and financing for the national Met services so they can be able to deliver the quality product that helps with planning for the health and for the different other sectors. So this is what can be done on the area of health and early warning. So the other question is, Martha, you said about
snow falling on the western part of Lake Victoria in Tanzania. What is this kind of phenomenon? Okay. Is this expected to increase or not? Yeah.
Okay, snowfall or like a single weather event like that are hard to link directly to climate change. For example, there is snow or hail snow recently also was in Sudan during heavy rainfall. So those are a bit difficult to link directly to climate change because they are just one event. They are not. We cannot link them directly to climate change because sometimes you have a development of weather condition that can be physically enabling, for example, for snow or hailstorm over a certain area. But that is not necessarily something will continue, for example, unless it became more frequent, then we can see what is the link between it and climate change. But I remember the winter last up in Tanzania, in Kenya recently, the temperature condition remain cold somewhere up to mid or the second half of August. And that mostly due to intrusion of cold air from the southern part, southern hemisphere. That is what the analysis of KMD, because they look on their maps every day. So intrusion of cold air from the southern part of Africa, because that region is actually under winter time, their winter time. So when you have an intrusion of cold air, it keeps the temperature colder over, even over Kenya, when it is expected the winter or the coldest months, July, to end and the temperature. But that would be rare.
Okay. So there is a question very linked to this, Abubakar, from Molen Kenyana from UBC Uganda, on how can we as media establish a linkage between an individual extreme weather event and climate change?
This is a good question. You need maybe to discuss it with climate scientists. You can get their feedback because they're probably familiar with the frequency, for example, of multiple events. So they can maybe advise on whether this thing can be linked to climate change, or there is no way, or there is no apparent link to link a single event to climate change. What I say, for example, I myself as a scientist, I feel comfortable attributing, for example, the severe tropical cyclones to climate change, because tropical cyclones, as I said, it is basic science. It is known that the temperature, when the surface temperature of the ocean maybe reach 24 and above, up to 27 degrees Celsius, and you have a right condition for the atmospheric circulation, because we are in a rotating system. So when initial conditions are good, the dynamic is there, and then you have the warmer water, that could be the condition for tropical cyclones to develop. And tropical cyclones are also known, their strength is from the warm water of the ocean. So when you have all those information together, you can feel comfortable linking severe event like tropical cyclones to climate change. And because you have enough evidence that saying the ocean is warming, and you have basic physics saying the tropical cyclones develop over warm water, and they feed the warm water is became like a fuel for tropical cyclones. You have all those information together, you would feel comfortable to link this to climate change. Other phenomena might be a bit isolated. It's hard to link it directly to climate change. We would like to remain objective in our analysis.
Okay, thank you, Abubakar. Now we're going to take Colin Zomulo from Daily Nation, the Nation Media Group. Yes, Colin. Colin, feel free to unmute yourself. Yes, Colin.
Yes, I've typed the question, but I can also just ask it. In Nairobi, we've been experiencing some, I think, for lack of a better term, I could call it an erratic weather pattern, where in the morning you wake up, you wake up in 4 hours. It is where you wake up to a freezing cold, then in a matter of hours, you get that the weather is hot. So I don't know what can explain this. What is behind this kind of weather pattern?
Yes, thank you. Yes, yeah. As I said, it's a bit difficult to link just the weather directly to climate change. So I don't really see that we can explain it directly with the linking to climate change. But weather it depends really on the day to day. So the weather by itself changes erratically from one day to another, and the surrounding condition over the region. So sometimes you can have, for example, in the year of 2000, if I remember correctly, the rainy season, for example, I think January 2020. So in East Africa, we call the short rain, right? You have from somewhere mid-October up to mid or the end of December, and then the rain end. That is the short rainy season. But I think in this year, the rain continued even up to January. And that also was a bit particular condition due to also intrusion of moist air from the Kangu Basin area. And that kept the season continuing up to January. And people are also wondering what happened, why is it continuing up to January. So there are some, those are, unless they became frequent, you wouldn't be able to associate them or to consider them something out of the normal immediately, because the atmosphere or the weather system by itself, it has some bit of randomness in it. So, but if they became frequent, then we can be able to see what is the causing mechanism behind them. But there are some other phenomena, they are easy to link them to the climate change because there is enough record of information can help you to understand their impact. For example, the heavy rainfall of the year 2020 through the year from end of 2019 up to 2020, that was linked to what you call Indian Ocean dipole, which is also a pattern in the temperature over the Indian Ocean, where you have the eastern part, for example, of the ocean near Sumatra region, colder than the water in the near coast of East Africa. And that we call positive Indian Ocean dipole. So it's just a variation in the temperature. And this variation caused usually associated with heavy rainfall and flood and landslide over East Africa. And that year, the Indian Ocean dipole, the difference in the temperature between those two regions of the Indian Ocean was exceptional, was really, really one of the strongest in record also. And that caused very heavy rainfall over a wider area of East Africa. And if you go back to the record, you will notice that heavy rainfall and landslide over Kenya and Uganda and even South Sudan experienced a flood and drove the water level of Lake Victoria up to the historic level of 13.5 degrees, 13.5 meter, not degrees Celsius. So that's what happened.
Okay,
so I think we need enough record.
Okay, thank you. Like there is a question from Gerald from New Vision, Uganda, who asks, River Nile is changing in terms of the water it carries, and of course its variability as well. What can be done from a regional and national point of view?
Okay, this is a good question. Yeah, the River Nile is changing, and the water increase, and in the future, as I said, it might this variability is going to increase also. So one of the things that is need to be done is a better water management system. So, for example, we need to manage the water in a good way that enable us in the year when we have surplus, we control and save the water, for example, and that will reduce the risk of flood. For example, when you manage the water and you control it, you in a surplus, in a year of surplus, you will reduce the risk of flood and you have a surplus water restored. And then when the year that comes with lower than usual water inflow, then you have a surplus that you could use. But this will require collaboration, for example, in having infrastructure to manage the water and also to share information between countries. Because also it's sometimes you can have a flood, not necessarily because the water is really too much, but because of water management. So if we have an infrastructure and information sharing between countries, that could help also to manage the water system in a better way that benefit all the countries in the region. And of course, reduce the risk of losing lives and livelihood.
Great, thank you, Abubakar. Like there is also a question, and I can invite my colleague Linda to respond to this one on gender, on what is the impact of climate change in gender in the region and also migration.
Thank you, Marta. I think that's a very interesting question, and particularly because there's no direct cause where you can say, okay, fine, it rains more on women than it does on men. The impacts come because when we look at climate change, we just don't look at it in terms of what's happening in the weather, but then we begin to look at vulnerability. That's when we begin to see the gender differences. So for example, in Africa, we talk about access to resources, access to land. So because of the unequal, you find a lot of women do not have access to land, do not have the same access to resources as the many men do, or they're disproportionately disadvantaged when it comes to access to land. So when it comes to climate efforts, or even in decision making as well, so when it comes to mitigating climate or adapting to climate, then you find that because they do not have the resources to be able to adapt, or the resources, even when it comes to flood, you find that because they tend to be the ones left in the village, or they don't have the same capacity to or the strength to be able to respond to hazards or disasters in the same way as men do, then you find that areas where you only find women and children end up suffering more when climatic or disasters happen, as opposed to a family that has a man that can be able to, in a certain way, have more strength to respond. So those are some of the areas when it comes to gender. It's more not necessarily that, for example, women experiencing a different climatic patterns as men are, but it's more in terms of vulnerability, access to resources that brings about the differences between how climate impacts men than it does women. And then also as a region, it's been recognized that we don't collect a lot of gender data, meaning we don't have a lot of data, for example, when it comes to impacts on men and women. So there's still a lot of room to be able to understand this a bit more. And when it comes to migration, we usually talk about climate change and mobility. We usually look at people who are moving temporarily. For example, people who move from one place to another and then go back. Those are people who are displaced, and then people who decide to move completely. So when times of flood, times of drought, you find there's some people who will then, because their homes are flooded, there's no pasture, for example, for pastoralists, then they decide that they're going to move to a different region in large numbers and resettle somewhere temporarily, go back. So those are some of the impacts you see. So then what implications that does have for them in terms of loss of livelihoods, and then what implications does that have for them in terms of large populations moving into new areas, looking at the new area where this new migrants have settled, have to then share the resources, that they have to share the healthcare, the access to food. So then it also creates issues of tensions. And so there's a lot around migration that is being discussed that ICPAC is doing, and hopefully will be releasing soon in terms of understanding the nexus between climate change and migration, and understanding, I think ICPAC has also published something with the disaster risk management in terms of climate change and on disasters and how it impacts gender specifically. So those resources are available on the ICPAC website. And we will be releasing also a lot more information on the nexus between migration and climate change, and specifically and disasters.
Great, thank you very much, Linda. Kenny, I hope this responds your question. So there is a final question by Hezron from KTN News in Kenya. Until when are we expecting the situation in Kenya, the dry situation, especially in Kilifi and Turkana, and other parts of the country to persist? Also, like, what has the region done in terms of learning from past experiences, and what are we doing, like, to be able to be more prepared for these extremes? Abubakar, I see you're sharing, so maybe you can take this one, and then talk to us a little bit about what the role of media and journalists is in all this situation.
Good. Thank you very much, Marta. Yes, this is a good question about the current condition and what is the region has done. Okay, it's a great question. It gives an idea about what can we do. First of all, the current condition is expected to continue until the end of the year, because the forecast that ICPAC releases, it is for the season from October up to December, and the season up to the end of December, showing that rainfall is going to be below normal over this region. And the analysis for the observed condition, which is the past, the previous season, the May to March to May, was also showing that the situation is the rainfall is lower than the rainfall that happened is actually lower than the usual. So through the year, it seems that this area is going to through a drought condition, and the past and the projected are not good. But the good news is, if you notice this time, is that there's early action. Already the president, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, already declared drought emergency over Kenya, I think over the whole country because of that part. And that this is a value, I think this is really a good case of showing the value of climate services and climate information, because this the declaration of drought emergency happened based on the climate information that came from KMD and from ICPAC. Because we work together, ICPAC and the National Met Services, they work together on analyzing the condition and developing the outlook for the previous months and analyzing also the past. So all those agencies, regional and at national level, they agreed that this condition is going to continue and it's going to be a drought condition. And the government immediately acted based on those information. If you notice in previous years, usually everyone is relaxed, waiting until the end, December, when the crisis already, the situation is messy, animals are already died, livelihood is destroyed. And then after that, we talk about drought, and then we call other countries to come and help. But now this is good. Now we are going in the right track. We see the value of climate information in helping and in giving what is the future look like, and then in government react to it, the decision makers. So this is a good scenario, because we are not going to eradicate the variability or the climate change in the system. They are there. We have to just find a way to live with them. And this is the best approach, that we do early action based on information. Of course, support for the Met Services. Now, I think you as a journalist, I brought this because I want to move from this question. I hope I answered it well. I move to the potential role
actually,
of journalists.
Like Abubakar, like maybe before the role of journalist, Madam Stella Aura has her hand raised.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Just to add to what Abubakar is saying, I'm Stella Aura, Director of Meteorological Services in Kenya. We've come up with this concept called a National Climate Outlook Forum, which brings together the producers of the weather and climate information and the users. So after ICPAC produces a forecast for the region, the National Met Services downscale that forecast based on the conditions on the ground. And we bring in all stakeholders, including the media, the power generators, the national disaster people, humanitarian institutions, and we prepare the forecasts for each and every sector, working closely with the sectors. As for the regions that are experiencing drought, because the last two seasons were not very good, rainfall seasons were not very good for them, we quickly issued the forecast, and in good time so that we can have early action. And we expect the media, of course, to assist us to remind people that a forecast has been issued and can people please act on it. And we are very glad that the government of Kenya, for example, has taken early action. We cannot prevent climate change or drought or floods, but if we are informed, if the sectors are informed in good time, we should be able to prevent loss of lives and property. Thank you.
Hello, Martha, are you here?
Yes. Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much for this, Stella. We're really lucky today to have Madam Stella with us, and that she has been able to respond directly to the media this question. Yes, Abubakar, over to you.
No, yeah, great. I agree 100% with Madam Stella, and that the swift and timely information from KMD has helped really to advise the country and to advise the leadership of the country to take the right decision on this issue. And I think this will help a lot in mitigating the impact of the drought over that part of eastern part of Kenya. And I was also advocate for Madam Stella to get more resources, since she's showing the value of the services that KMD provide. So this saves the lives and saves livelihood, and so journalists can help on highlighting that not only the KMD, but all the national Met services in the region are really underfunded, and they will need this support. So if it's okay, Martha, and there's no more question, I can just go quickly through those, because those are a slide we have shared before on training or discussion with journalists on what is the potential role the media can play on the issue of climate change.
Yes, of course. Like, we've also given like an email address in the chat box. So if you have questions we haven't answered, we will respond them over email. So yeah, Abubakar, over to you.
Yes, great. Okay, those are just point that we discussed before with journalists, like the people we have today, and on the issue of climate change. So one of the areas that media can help with is just educating about climate change and publishing like robust information about it, because there's sometimes there's what do you call it, like misinformation that are spread. And they are mostly driven by private interest, people who have interest on burning fossil fuel, and they spread misinformation and they challenge science. So that is not healthy. The media has a role to produce or to publish robust information. They also can hold those greenhouse gas emitter accountable, because the impact is really, it affects the whole human society. So emitters could also be held accountable to discuss with them their role in the impact of on climate change, and that there might be other alternative of green energy it could be used for development and economic activities. Journalists can also be the voice for those most of the vulnerable communities, because the impact is on them. The most affected people, actually, the poor people, the people who do not have capacity to cope. People who are well off, they are fine, they could build a better house, they could change their livelihood method, or they have a bit of surplus that they can act on. But the most vulnerable communities who are affected by the impact of climate change, they don't have that luxury. So maybe journalists can also be the voice for those most vulnerable communities affected by climate change. Let me move again. So journalists also can help with the dissemination of climate information and early warning. Like Madam Stella was saying, that journalists can help when information coming, for example, from KMD or from any of the national meteorological agency, please take them and disseminate this information And I think when you're doing that, you're really doing public good. Yeah, it might not be paying, or the Met Service doesn't have money to pay for the media, but the media can do that for the public good. And I think that is really valuable contribution could be from the side of the media to disseminate climate information. There's also potential room for building public-private partnership. For example, you can create a partnership between KMD and between a media agency, for example. And then you can bring the private sector as a sponsor. I think there's room for that. And if you are a media agency, you have the room directly to communicate with, from, for example, Madame Stella. You take the forecast from the KMD and publish it on the newspaper and find a sponsor for that. For example, Safaricom or any of the big companies, and they can see it as a social responsibility. And then the revenue can be split between the media and the National Met Service, whether it's KMD or UNIMA or one of the national Met Services. Also, we have a responsibility to our governments in the region. We have to hold them also accountable on the areas that what they are doing in the area of climate change adaptation and mitigation. There is room to access, for example, finance. Hopefully, there will be some finance from the developed world, and then our countries and our politicians need to access that fund to work on the area of climate adaptation and climate mitigation over the region. For the developed countries, the EU, we can also call for example, financial support. We hold them also accountable for their emission. We have to communicate that we are really affected by the impact of climate change, and they need to cut down their emission. And we need finance. Technology transfer could be also an area that are very helpful. So it can help the African countries to develop. Of course, African countries have the right to develop, but they can follow a green path. And the green path need technology. For example, renewable energy technologies and all those technologies, they can help the African countries to follow, to develop, but following a green path that are less pollutant. So those are the role that media can really help with and can contribute with. So I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you so much, Abubakar, and everyone today. Now I'm just gonna request Alex Crook to maybe have like a final call to action of 1 minute before we close this press briefing session today.
Thank you, Marta. I don't know if you guys can see me again, but hopefully you can hear me. So very quickly, just to bring this all back to COP, which is taking place in 5 weeks' time. COP is our really, really big opportunity to make an impact on climate issues and find a way to reduce those emissions, but also build that resilience to all of those impacts that we've seen from Abubakar. So it's a really big event. It's a global event, and media have a really, really big role to play. We need your focus on the event to get the right result. We need you to put that focus, put that pressure on the politicians, but also, and hold them to account, but we also need the help of the media to sensitize climate and COP issues with the general public, especially in East Africa, who don't necessarily understand the impact of their actions. So that's kind of my call to you. If you don't know them already, get in touch with your local comms lead at the British High Commission. I'm sure we can help with that. There'll be loads of comms material coming out around that thing, and we really look forward to working with you over the next 5 weeks or 7 weeks in the build up to and at COP26. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much for this call to action to cover COP, to continue to cover the climate crisis, and also like to do solutions journalism, to promote the solutions to the climate crisis. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. Abubakar, do you want to say any final words and then we close the meeting?
No, yeah, just quickly, yeah, thank you very much for organizing this media briefing, thanks to our colleagues and friends at the British High Commission, and to ICPAC, to Madam Stella from KMD, and for all the journalists who attended with us. We have really room to work with them more, collaborating with them more. In the coming months, beside the COP, there is also soon on 19th of October, there will be a release for the report on the state of climate over Africa. That is a WMO report. It's a report that is developed in collaboration between, or WMO coordinate the development of the report, but the content come from the regional climate centers and the national meteorological services in Africa. And together it is compiled to produce the state of the climate in Africa for the past year, the year 2020. The release of this report will happen on 19th of October. There will be a press briefing on that from WMO. You can just follow up with that, or if you can contact me via this email, I can find you more information so you can be updated on that. And then it will also be helpful if the media also pick up on the summaries of this report and also share it with the public and also inform about it in general. So please take note of that, 19th of October, and before that you can contact me if you need more information to link up with that meeting. So with this announcement, I'd like to thank you very much really for your time and for organizing this. Thanks to Marta and Palawi and all the colleagues who are behind this work. And I'm looking forward to work with you more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Abubakar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Madam Stella. It's really good to see you again.